Hello, everyone. I hope you all can hear me and see me. We are about to get started. I'm going to give it a few more seconds for a few more people to join us. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ana Ortega Villegas. I am the program director at Mobile Pathways, and today I will be moderating this conversation on the CBP One mobile app. Before we get started, this conversation is going to be recorded and available on the Mobile Pathways LinkedIn site soon after we get done with the live streaming. We have enabled the chat feature. If you have any questions throughout our 30-minute conversation, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will be monitoring them. Apologies in advance. We may not be able to get to all of your questions, but we will try our best. My colleague Jamal is going to drop his email on the chat. If you're having any tech issues or have specific questions, if you would like to contact our panelist at the end, please reach out to Jamal and he will be able to provide more assistance for you. And before diving into our conversation, I would like to introduce you to our amazing group of panelists and experts. Today, I'm very excited to be sharing this space with Poesy Chen, an Innovation Director at Mobile Pathways, Melissa Crow, Litigation Director at Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, and Hollie Webb, Supervising Attorney from Al Otro Lado. Thank you all very much for making time for the conversation. And as most of you know, or as you will learn, the CBP One mobile app is an application that has become the main portal to the US asylum system at our southern border. Today, we are going to learn about the glitches that are surrounding this app, the impact that these glitches are having on people seeking protection and are stranded at the border, and we are also going to learn about the legality around this issue. And if we, for some of us, this may sound very familiar to things we've seen in the past. So we will also cover some of that information with you all today. So being mindful of everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some questions directed to Hollie. Hollie, you are on the ground every day in Tijuana assisting asylum seekers who are using or trying to use this app. Can you explain to us what is it like to use the app? What is it easy? Is it difficult? What glitches are you seeing? And when I say glitches, what's the impact that these glitches are having on people who are trying to seek protection?
Well, I think first of all, it's been incredibly difficult because when the U.S. government rolled out the app, there was no official guidance. There has been no information directed at the migrant community about how to use the app. When people have problems with the app, there's nowhere they can go apart from nonprofits and lawyers who are trying to help them to try to understand how to use the app. And with this app, like the US government has made this the only pathway to the US asylum system. So people's lives are hanging in the balance of them being able to use a smartphone app every day. There are limited spaces daily. So you have thousands of people logging on at the same time, trying to basically enter a lottery for the chance to seek safety. So with that said, when the app was rolled out, it was only initially rolled out in English and Spanish. Haitian Creole was added later, but for this to be the only pathway to asylum, there are only 3 languages. So anybody else is excluded from that if you don't speak one of those languages. You have to have a smartphone to use the app. So if you don't have the economic resources to own a smartphone, then you're also excluded from the process. Certain smartphone brands don't work with the app, so that's also an issue. You have to have really, really strong Wi-Fi or a really stable data connection, which for many migrants at the border who are living in crowded shelters or even in the streets, that's not an option. So, already thousands of people are excluded from who is able to use this app and be able to make this work. When the app first rolled out as well, there were a lot more problems with, there's a feature where when you first register, you have to take what's called a live photo. and it does sort of a facial scan to make sure that the person in front of them is actually there and it's who they say that they are. For the scan, when the app initially started, it didn't work for people with darker skin tones. So Black migrants specifically were excluded from the process. There were some upgrades with the app, so this has gotten better to an extent, but we do still see those same errors. And so on top of that, so you have, lots of the most vulnerable people at the border who are excluded. The app was also difficult for people with certain disabilities. We had reports of people who had physical disabilities who couldn't physically stay still. The scan wouldn't recognize them either. It was difficult for children, especially for babies. There were just lots of people that this part of the app didn't work for. And throughout all of this, people and nonprofits have made reports to the government, and some things have been addressed to some extent. But overall, people are still having, a really difficult time using the application. And they still continue to see just dozens and dozens of error messages at all stages of the app. Some are based on the Wi-Fi connection from what we've been told, but others, there's no explanation. There's no official guidance from the US government or the administration about what the various error messages mean. So it's trial and error for most people, and people feel very desperate in that. It's traumatizing to have to wake up every day and hope that you get a chance in this lottery to seek safety.
Thank you so much for that background, Holly. And just hearing to you describe the difficulties around this app, it's very frustrating. I imagine for us when we're trying to use an app and it's giving us difficulty. If I'm trying to buy tickets to a concert, I get very frustrated. Now, can you imagine this is an app that is being used by people seeking asylum, people seeking protection, people who need to feel safe, and it's an urgency. So I can only I can't explain how annoying this is at many levels. I'm sorry that people are going through this, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing to try to help people get around these glitches. And Posey, I'm going to pass it to you to see how you, as a tech expert, how you're feeling after hearing about the things that Holly described to us. Is this, with your expert opinion, like, do these glitches have a justification? From here, after hearing about them, do you think could they be fixed? I would love to also hear about the facial recognition aspect that Holly mentioned, and just generally hear from you about your concerns, again, as a tech expert.
Well, thank you. I guess first things first, developing an app on the mobile phone is difficult. I think sometimes because there are so many of them out there, um, people overly simplify it. When you develop an app, you have to make sure that it is small enough to fit on people's phones, work on many versions of the mobile phone's operating system, and you got to test. You got to test with a lot of different data sets. And I think this app unfortunately fell into a situation where it did a lot of the common mistakes that most developers would miss. So they forgot to make um, uh, what we call regression testing. So make sure that their app works on older versions of the iOS or older versions of the operating system. And people probably didn't test with enough data sets to realize that, goodness, this is not behaving correctly at a certain point or at different levels of Wi-Fi or data signal. One thing I did notice was that the app was very, very big in terms of how long it would take for you to install, to download off of data. And when an app is that big, it tells me the app is trying to do a lot on your phone. And that is a signal that, hey, you're probably going to run into a lot of issues. And as Holly was saying, yes, a lot of people are running into error messages. Um, is it discriminating actively against those with darker skin? On this, I wanted to share that most people are probably not writing their own facial recognition system from scratch. They're probably using something else that somebody else has developed, like Google, like Apple, or something like that. Um, So this is kind of talking to a very sensitive issue when data is now driving social behavior. Data is driving justice. And there's no governance to say that commercially available facial recognition systems have to include a diversified um, sample in their training data. There's nothing governing that. All this is just hopefully using the market forces um, to encourage innovation. So do we have data sets to say that is potentially discriminating? A few years ago, there may have been at the beginnings of the technology. Um, I think one study mentioned that depending on where the code was written, and they're usually testing with by pointing cameras at their coworkers, it may work better to that ethnic background than other background. Just an example to say how data drives the output behavior of the application. So to that, I'm not sure they're purposely doing the mistreatment of those with darker skin. But that being said, they have to be conscious of the vendors that they're choosing to make sure that the vendors they're choosing is inclusive in their facial recognition practices. Um, is it easy to introduce changes? I think Melissa was sharing just before the call that there may be upcoming updates. Um, One of the benefits of having a mobile application is that updates can be very frequent. Um, I think those who are developers need to do a much better job communicating what features and bug fixes are coming in the upcoming release and communicate what changed, clearly communicate what versions of the application runs on what versions of the OS, and make sure that people know what to do. Make sure that help information is available in there, tech support is in there. You don't just throw an app out in the open and let people duke it out. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much for that input and information, Posey. I think that for some of the immigration advocates who may not be as familiar with the tech component of the work that we're doing, this is very, very valuable information to hear from you on the opinion, the observation, and the concerns that you have. Tech should be used to help to make things easier, and it's unfortunate that what we're seeing with the use of this app, a lot of people are not finding it helpful. So we hope that with the recently announced changes to the app, hopefully we will see some improvements. Hollie, we will probably be checking back with your team to see if at some point you can feel that there has been a positive change or impact with the use of the app. And again, let's I want to pass it to you, Melissa. You are our legal and litigation expert, and what we're talking about this the use of the app to regulate the way and how people are being asked to seek protection. Does this sound familiar to you? Have we seen similar practices in the past? And if so, can you talk to our audience about what your team has been doing to to address these attempts to regulate the way people seek protection at our borders? And I also want you to talk about the word capacity and how capacity has been used perhaps as an excuse to implement this type of practices, and explain to us if this type of practices are they legal? Do they have legality? And if not, how are you challenging them, and or how will you continue to challenge them? I'll pass it to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Anna, for those questions. The government has been working hard for many, many years to regulate the flow of asylum seekers to our southern border. A number of immigrants' rights organizations, including mine, the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, have spent the last 5 years litigating a case on behalf of Al Otro Lado, Hollie's organization, and a class of thousands of individual asylum seekers, challenging the government's practice of turning back asylum seekers who present themselves at ports of entry along the southern border. The mechanisms of turnbacks have changed over the years, but the result has always been the same. And one of the most prevalent tactics that the government has used is called metering. It was a policy that the government formalized and memorialized in April of 2018. And essentially, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, posted officers at the limit line at the actual physical border between Mexico and the United States, and they would direct arriving asylum seekers to return to Mexico to put their names on wait lists that were run by the asylum seekers themselves. This was all based on blatantly false allegations that the government lacked capacity to process these people. And as a result, people were stranded for very long periods of time in northern Mexico under dangerous conditions where they often fell prey to violence. Last August, after many years of fighting, we got a good decision from a federal court in the Southern District of California, holding that the government's practice of systematically rejecting asylum seekers at ports of entry was illegal, and that border agents were required under the Immigration and Nationality Act to inspect and process individuals arriving at ports of entry and to give them a fair and meaningful opportunity to seek asylum. That decision is currently on appeal to the Ninth Circuit, and we hope that the Ninth Circuit will affirm the lower court's decision. But meanwhile, while we were fighting, CBP released a memo canceling the metering policy, at least the written policy, and providing updated guidance on the processing of non-citizens at ports of entry that says that asylum seekers cannot be required to submit advance information in order to be processed at a port. And that, of course, is exactly what CBP One requires them to do. We don't object to the government's use of technology if they're making things fairer and more efficient. We object to the government's exclusive reliance on CBP One, which, as Hollie explained, is fraught with technological glitches in such an important context where people are literally seeking safety and protection and could be killed if they're forced to return to Mexico and their home country. The application indeed really does seem like another form of metering. It's essentially like a digital wait list. And in some respects, it's worse than metering itself because of the problems that Hollie and Poesy identified. When you had a wait list, most people were able to put their names physically in writing on the list, with some exceptions. There was a lot of discrimination on how it functioned, and there was some corruption that has been reported on. But in this case, your chance of getting a CBP One appointment is about as good as your chance of getting a concert ticket to see Bruce Springsteen or Taylor Swift. I mean, the arbitrariness is simply shocking. And people are, of course, competing for a very limited number of appointments and hoping to get lucky, just like if you got that concert ticket. In terms of capacity, we learned through the litigation that the government has a lot more capacity than they have ever acknowledged to process asylum seekers presenting at ports of entry. Metering and now CBP One are choices that the government is making to control the flow of asylum seekers, in spite of its statutory obligations to inspect and process them. And we know that in other cases where the government has needed more capacity, they have reallocated resources and they've bent over backwards to make things work. And a great example of that, not so great example of that, was in 2014 when they repurposed trailers to detain families coming in at the border under the Obama administration. So a lot of the money that is currently being spent on militarizing the border and detaining people in search of protection could easily be used to reestablish fair and efficient processing at the border, as the government showed us they could do when there was an influx of Ukrainians so many months ago. I hope that answers all the questions you posed, but happy to explain further if that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I think that you were able to explain to our audience the legality of the aspect. You provided a really useful background of what we've seen in the past, and in a very easy to digest way for audience that maybe not so familiar with the issue or with our legal codes. I really appreciate all that information. And Melissa is reminding us that seeking asylum is a human right that we all have. That capacity has been used as an excuse, and that technology should be used to help people, to make things easier. In this case, to help people who need the protection, get that protection in a fast way. We hope that the anticipated changes to the app are positive and that can continue to help people who need the help to seek that protection. I would like, we have about 8 minutes before my final call to action. I would love to encourage our audience to drop, if you have any comments, any questions, I'm sorry, for our panelists. Take this opportunity. They're all very busy. It is rare that you have them all together to answer some of your questions. I would like to thank the Mobile Pathways team, who I think did a beautiful way of bringing together Hollie, who gave you that humanitarian background and explanation on what the conditions are on the ground. Poesy, with her tech experience and knowledge, spoke to our more techie audience on what the glitches on the app are. And I hope that for that audience that's more techie, more familiar with tech, I hope that you are upset and energized to spread the word about not only this app, but the glitches that the app is having, so that hopefully we can make some positive change. And Melissa, who covered a very important aspect of the work, the legal and the litigation. Through these efforts, we can make change. And while I wait for some questions to come in, I would like to encourage everyone who joined us today to get involved. Now that you maybe received a refresher on what's going on, or now that you learned about these issues for the first time, spread the word. Talk to your friends, to your family about what you just learned. Share the recording. If you are now wanting to know, well, what can I as an individual do to help? We encourage you to visit our organization's websites. You can volunteer with us. You can donate not only money, but time, expertise, and get more involved in these issues. Please reach out to your members of Congress at the state and federal level. We should remind our representatives and government officials that we belong to welcoming communities who care about these issues and who are ready to continue welcoming refugees and those people who need the protection. I see a question from Tim. Can you please address some of the concerns the CBP app raises regarding privacy and accessibility concerns for asylum seekers? Not sure who from our audience could address these questions from Tim. Thank you, Tim, and good seeing you.
I'll speak to what I know. In terms of accessibility, um, I think industry as a whole, not just this one app, is struggling with dealing with mobile apps. Um, if you are blind, how would you be able to see what buttons to press? If you don't speak a language, if you're colorblind, even something as simple as that, would you be able to navigate? And I think it's an industry wide challenge in terms of data privacy. Obviously, everybody says, "I don't collect data. I let you delete data." Um, I don't believe they support the deletion of a submitted application right now. They let you delete things locally from your app, but once you have submitted, I do not believe there's a way to request it to be deleted from their server. I am hoping that answers the question.
I'll just add to that our understanding is that the information submitted or required to be submitted through CBP One is the same information that would be elicited if somebody came to the border to present. The real issues are the inability to submit the required information and the time it takes to get through the process, and the ability or lack of ability to ultimately get the appointment. I say that with the caveat that I am not a privacy expert.
I'll add to
Thank you,
that too.
Melissa. Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Holly.
I was just going to add that, there are lots of privacy concerns for asylum seekers being processed at the border in addition to the app, because for many people, they're required to take like a DNA swab that's kept on record. There are photos that are taken by the app, or whether it's by the app, or if they were processed more traditionally and just went into CBP custody, the photo of them is then still accessible to other law enforcement databases in the US. So, I mean, there are lots of privacy concerns for asylum seekers being processed.
Thank you, Holly. And I'm seeing on the chat a few comments from members of the audience who maybe perhaps work in tech companies and who are learning about this issue. Posey, if I may ask you, like, how could tech companies maybe become involved or make a positive mark on issues like this, in your opinion, or what have you seen? What would you recommend?
There are a couple of quick things. They have to, number one, make sure that whatever is the server, whoever the app is connecting to something, that other end has to be powerful enough to handle all the requests that are coming through, and at least just eliminate any of these connectivity issues. We are seeing similar issues on the ACIS website where the server just run out of capacity and give you the wrong answer or give you no answer, and that is not okay. So that's the easiest thing that they can do, given so many things are in the cloud. This could be just a dial of a button to say increase capacity. Recommend we do that first. Second thing is certainly improve usability testing, right? If you are going to design something, make sure that it makes sense to the user who are going to be using it. Make sure the directions make sense. Make the error messages are big and visible, so they understand what they did wrong. It is not okay just to say, error, try again. You have to say, error, you did this wrong. I couldn't do that. Therefore, please try again with this instead. That has to be that clear.
Thank you, Posey. And I'm being mindful of time. We have almost 1 minute left. Apologies if we were not able to get to your questions. If you would like to contact any of our panelists or receive more information on the work that our organizations are doing, please reach out to our colleague Jamal. He will put you in touch with any of us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Keep an eye on your LinkedIn page and emails. This is the first of what we hope to be many conversations on not only the CBP One mobile app, but there are plenty of issues, as you've heard today, and as you can imagine, that we will be discussing throughout this year. So please stay tuned. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our amazing group of experts and panelists for making the time from your busy days to spend this half an hour with us. I truly appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Stay in touch and stay hydrated. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.